Just a bit of shameless self-promotion. Let's get you guys, if possible, if anyone is able to do so, if you would consider potentially making a post about us on some social media platform about maybe what we've been doing today, so we can get the news out there and then we can get funding. We're able to do these kind of events in the future. So I'm from my UCAT, which is this thing on the left-hand side, my UCAT admissions. And all the other guys, amazing volunteers, are from Medics&Me. And so if you would be maybe considering putting a post about us on LinkedIn about how today was, then you could potentially tag us, or maybe on Instagram. We both have Instagram accounts, anything like that would be super, super helpful and appreciated if you have any time. So thank you so much if you can do that. And if not, I mean, I completely understand. Some people don't like posting stuff. Very understandable. In that case, what I'm gonna do is I'll put a link for somewhere you can leave us some reviews. And if you'd be able to leave us some reviews instead, that would also be massively appreciated. So thank you so much, and otherwise see you at 2 o'clock.
We're really over the moon with what like the quality of what we're able to put out to you guys for free. And it's really what we stand for here at Medics and Me. OJAS would never ever ask this of us. This is completely from me. But if anyone has really enjoyed his teaching or thought it's been really good, there is no obligation to do this whatsoever. But I've just put a little link in the chat if anyone wants to leave a little rating based on what you think the quality of his teaching has been. Again, no pressure whatsoever to do this. But I don't know, I'm sure you guys can agree. It's been really, really incredible. And you can tell how much effort he's put into it. So we're super grateful. And just thought we'd put a little advert out there. Also, if anyone has LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, we're on all those socials. If you want to post about coming today, post about what we're doing, it helps us so, so much. And we'll repost anything you guys tag us in to make someone just DM'd me. OJAS is a banging teacher. I agree. Frank was actually saying, does OJAS do MRCS things? Because he's a doctor and he's going to be doing his surgical exams. So big up to OJAS. He's the absolute king. But if you guys want to tag us in LinkedIn, tag us on Instagram, tag us on Twitter, it all helps us so much. Get our name out there, do more stuff like this. And it's just always nice to read your lovely messages if you enjoy it and if you find it helpful. We are pretty much Jude, Joe, are doctors, loads of medical, I'm a doctor, loads of medical students here. We're all giving up our Saturdays. So these things help us so, so much. And we want to help you guys. But it's also really nice to read your little messages and see any support from you guys. So yeah, amazing teaching from OJAS, incredible OJAS. I'm getting all the DMs. Thanks, guys. But yeah, we really hope you're finding it helpful so far. Let us know in the chat what you're thinking of it so far. We would love to hear. And yeah, tag us in anything. Give us a follow, give us a rate. It helps us so much. And without further ado, we hope you guys enjoy the afternoon. So over to the gang.
Thank you so, so much, Megan, for that. And thank you so much to the team at Medics&Me. I mean, this would not be possible, the scale, the publicity, any of this without the fantastic team of volunteers at Medics&Me. So thank you so much to you guys as well. And yeah, if anyone can leave these things in the chat, follow Medics&Me, follow my UCAT, put stuff on LinkedIn, would be massively appreciated. So thank you so much, and also you guys for coming and giving up your Saturday. And so I think it's now Jude is going to talk to you about some abstract reasoning whenever you're ready.
Are you not doing the first bit?
Am I doing the first bit? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
I'm doing the first bit then. Okay, so with abstract reasoning, we've got a total of 50 questions, and we have to answer the 50 questions in 12 minutes. Now, if you listen to it like that, it sounds impossible. How am I going to answer questions in a matter of like less than 30 seconds? But the way you have to see it is what you actually have is you have 9 sets of set A, B, or set A, B, neither, and then you have 5 standalone questions. So you have these 9 sets of 5 questions, plus you have these 5 standalone. So 45 and 50, total 50 questions. Now, for these 9 sets, what I recommend is you spend a total of about 1 minute on each one of them. So rather than saying you have to do 12 minutes divided by 50 on each question, what you should really do is spend up to around 1 minute to find out the pattern, and then it's only going to be a matter of seconds to actually match up the test boxes. So try and get it done in about 30, 40 seconds, but up to a minute to find the pattern, and then maximum 1 minute. If you can't see anything by maybe the 30-second point, at that point you might want to say guess and move on. But you have up to 1 minute per set, and then you've got 9 sets of this set A, B, neither. And then you've got 5 of these standalone questions, which is where you've got a series or you've got a statement, and you have to find out what comes next. Now, if I tell you that we have 45 of these set A, B, neither questions, how much time of your preparation do you think you should be spending on set A, B, neither versus next in the series? A lot, yeah, because the set A, B, they're worth 90% of your marks, and these ones are worth like 5% each. So in terms of how much time you spend, definitely not much more than 5-10% on each of these 2 question types. Now, the other thing is that these question types are generally a little bit easier, and you just do them as standalone. So most of your time for preparation on set A, B, neither questions, and that's what we're going to be focusing on for today. And just to confirm, this is what they look like, by the way, the what completes the statement, what comes next. So how you want to approach these set A, B, neither questions, the first thing you want to do is kind of lean back, look at both of them together and see if you can see any large scale differences. Like, is it that set B is always circles and set A is always squares? Or set B is always white and set A is always black? Look for stuff like that. Anything you can see on a large scale. And if you find that you can't really see anything on a large scale, like we look here, set A, set B, and you see loads of circles and arrows, there's not really a big difference between them, then you might want to now focus on some individual boxes. So you want to go for the simplest box in set A, and maybe look at what is common between the simplest box in set A and all the other boxes. And you might want to do the same thing for set B. So the simplest box in set B, and you might want to compare that to the simplest box in set A. So what does this box have in common with all the other boxes? And it's the simplest box because it's got the fewer other things in, just the 3 things there. And so what does it have in common with the other boxes, but not with the box in set B? What do we think? Yeah, really good. And something very helpful someone has put in the chat, which is that what we have in set B is usually going to be the opposite. Now, it might not be a direct opposite. Like in this case, A is 3 arrows in the corners and B is 2 arrows in the corners. So it might not necessarily be like arrows in the corners versus arrows in the middle. It might be more like 3 versus 2, or maybe like up arrows versus right arrows, but they're always going to be similar sorts of patterns between A and B. So if you figure out A, then figuring out B shouldn't be a big issue. Now, if that doesn't work, so some of the questions, that approach is going to be really nice. You get the pattern in seconds. And what should be reassuring is the patterns in the real exam, a lot of them, you can just do that. So it's not like they're all very tricky. And I would say that on the question banks as a whole, the patterns are a little bit more complicated than the ones you get in the real thing. And that's especially the case for abstract reasoning. So if you're finding abstract really tricky, and for me personally, it used to be a nightmare when I was starting out, like I struggled to get absolutely any of them. You're going to improve very quickly, but also the real exam tends to be easier for most people. But if you can't figure out anything straight away, then one option you might want to do when you're starting off your preparation is to do something like this. So we have, for example, SCANS OASIS, and that's like a kind of acronym that's going to tell you what are the different things you want to look for. So like shape, color, arrangement, number, side, all of these things. And some of these that might be confusing in particular are like sums and conditionals. So we're going to look at some examples of both of them so you know what sort of things to take a look out for when you have sums and conditionals. Now, conditional, all that means is like when you have one thing that leads to another thing. So, like when the circle is black, then the arrow is up. When the circle is white, then the arrow is down. Something like that. So these are the kind of things to look out for. But the problem is, realistically, in your real exam, you're not going to have time to go through shape, color, arrangement, number size, all of these. So what we want to do instead is we want to take a look for some kinds of triggers. And so what we want to look for is maybe when you see this sort of feature, then we're looking out for this sort of pattern. And what we're going to have now is Jude is going to have a chat with you about some of the different kinds of triggers. So we'll just do this one first, and then we'll have a chat. What kind of triggers maybe indicate what kind of patterns? So for this one, maybe just try systematically. What can you see? Yeah, really good. So A is going to be horizontal line of symmetry, and B is going to be vertical line of symmetry. So really quick from everyone. That's good to see. Now, if you find that this pattern maybe you didn't get straight away, and by the way, the test shape is going to be neither because it doesn't have either kind of line of symmetry. If you find that you're struggling to get some of these patterns, so horizontal versus vertical line of symmetry, then what is a good idea to do is make a list of all the patterns that you don't get. And in particular, I would categorize them in terms of what you see and then what you get. Now, someone in the chat has put a different acronym, and I'll just put that on the screen now, as this one looks pretty good as well. So thank you for sending that in. And honestly, it doesn't matter which one you use. It's the same idea either way, and it's just to help you get started. Now, by the time you get to the real exam, you're not going to be using these acronyms. So someone has suggested another one. But either way, by the time you're getting to an exam, the kind of things you're looking for is when you see this feature, the pattern was this. So you want to keep a list of these patterns on like a Google document, and you want to say, okay, when I saw this appearance, it turned out to be this. Like when I saw clocks, it was all about angles. It was all about odd and even numbers. When I saw intersecting lines, it was all about number of lines, number of intersections. Was it odd? Was it even? Like that. So then what you're going to do is when you go to your real exam and you see the same feature, you can think back to your notes. Oh, the last time I got something like this, the answer was this. And that's the way you want to be approaching these questions on the whole, rather than like systematically. So now we're going to take a look at some of the triggers for different sorts of patterns. And I'm going to let Jude go ahead with that if you're
Thank
around.
you, Ojas. Someone's just put in the chat what's meant by convex and concave, which we're going to answer later. Can I take control of the screen, please?
Yeah, should I let you share, then I'll unshare. And in the meanwhile, someone has a question for me. Are the question banks okay? Is Medify known to be harsher in scoring? Medify this year does have quite harsh scoring, even more so than Medify, but not necessarily harder questions. So
I
that's
don't
not
have the
quite the same
PowerPoint on
thing.
me, by the way.
You don't. Okay, let me
No.
share it.
Should I just
Or
tell
I
you
can go
when to
through if
move
you'd
over?
prefer. It there's your PowerPoint.
Perfect,
And
thanks.
I'll also share the link to the list of patterns as some people asked for that.
Yeah, screen.
Yeah, so while you're getting started, Jocelyn, your question is, Medify is not necessarily harder in terms of questions, but it's definitely a lot harsher in terms of scoring. So the way that they scale your score, like if you were to get, say, 30 out of 44 in VR, is a lot harsher than other prep platforms and also than the real thing. But in terms of the questions, I would say on the whole, MedEntry tends to have harder ones. Now, I'm not sure if we should talk about Medify and MedEntry too much here, as they're like commercial companies. but we can maybe see for the Q&A at the end.
Oh, Jazz, you might have to do this, unfortunately. My computer's not having a.
Okay, fine.
Sorry
Should
about
I just
that.
go through, or you want to talk through them,
Yeah, I'll talk through
but with
this.
on my screen?
Um,
Okay.
yeah, so I'm going to try and explain some quite complicated questions on abstract reasoning. So don't worry if you don't get them correct. Also, well done for all turning up today. I think it shows you're all very diligent and you'll make very good doctors coming here on a Saturday at 2 p.m. That's really good. But to begin with, if you just start by looking at set A and set B, and if you could just directly message me what you think the pattern in each set might be. You can use that paragraph on the left if you want, and I'm going to explain it afterwards, but just directly message me if you know what the pattern is. Okay, I'm getting a few messages. Okay.
Guys, just a reminder, if you could possibly just DM Jude your answers, just so then
Yeah.
we can keep it a little surprise for everyone.
So people are along the right lines. This is a very hard question. I always used to find these questions really hard in the exam. And a few people have got it right. So basically, with these questions, when you see multiple shapes, it's likely that you're going to need to make a sum, okay? And that sum is going to be equivalent throughout set A, and there's going to be a different sum of a different number throughout set B. And the easiest way that you can do that and find out what the sum is by simply looking where Ojast's gone on the top right corner. That slide has just circles. And if you attribute 1 to each circle, that makes 5. So you know that the sum of set A has to be 5 or a multiple of 5. Because they're all the same, they're all going to be the same number. And then from that, you can calculate the number or the value for other shapes. So if it is 5, which it is, if we go onto this slide here, we've attributed a circle as 1. So we take 1 away from 5, and that's 4. And then you divide that by 2 to create 2. So we know that the squares are 2. And you can continue doing this for the other shapes. And if you have a slide down here, which you're wondering about whether it's in set A or set B, once you know what the numbers are for each of the shapes, you will be able to identify whether it fits in with set A and set B. It's quite simple, but at the start, if you don't know the technique, it is very challenging. With regards to set B, you've got 7 triangles here. And if we attribute 1 to each triangle, then that makes 7. So we know it's got to be 7 or 14 or 21. And if you look here with the 3 stars and the triangle, you can take 1 away because we've attributed 1 for the triangle. And we've got 6 left. And 6 divided by 3 equals 2. And that makes each star worth 2. Does that make sense to everyone? It's okay if you need me to repeat things. No. So it's
like
just
key idea, look for this box. So particularly this one box with all of the same kind of shape and lots of it, nothing else in that box. When you see this kind of giveaway feature, then you're looking for a kind of sum where you give each shape a certain number of points.
Yeah. And we don't know that one triangle is 1. That is just a value that we're attributing to a triangle. And that creates a number through which we can find out other values for the different shapes, if that makes sense. How do you know when to use this method? Someone's asked. It's when I wouldn't get too bogged down on it, but it's usually when there's multiple shapes. Okay. So you can see there's a circle, a square, and there's no color patterns as well. Does that make sense to
The next
people?
one is just the same. So if you want to try the next one, that might
Yeah,
help.
the next one is a bit harder. So if people could just message me again, what they think the pattern might be. Again, I appreciate that this is a really challenging question. Yeah, so someone's put pentagon 1, triangle 3. Yeah, you're along the right lines. The reason why this one's a bit more challenging, yeah, someone's got it. So if you see, we've got 7 pentagons here, and we attribute 1 to a pentagon. So we create 7. 7 is the value for this set. And then you can work out the other numbers from that. On this side, you've got 3 triangles, and you can attribute 1. So we know it's got to be a multiple of 3. However, if you try and take values away from 3 to create to find out what the other numbers are, you realize this has got seven shapes here. You can't take, there's no way that 7 adds up to 3. So it's got to be more than 7. So that is why it's a multiple of 3. It's not 6, it's 9. Does that make sense?
What I would say, actually, just one thing to add is when you get these kind of questions where you're trying points and you see that set A adds up to a certain thing, the first thing I would do is just try the same points in set B. So if in set A we've said that these are all equal to 1, and then if this is 1, then like we've decided that these are, say, 3, and then we have um so 2 and 2, then I would try the exact same values in set B and see if they add up to something. So if you find that they then add up to a consistent number, you could stick with the same values. That could be one approach. So if you've decided the values in set A, you could then try the exact same values in set B. And if you see in set A that whenever you use those values, they add up to 7, you can do the exact same thing in set B, and you'll see that they'll always add up to 9. So like if in this one it's always going 7, then this one, same values in set B would always add up to 9, and then that would be your difference.
Yeah. Someone has asked, why is B 9 and not 6? So if you look at this
Be
slide,
9 and not 6 because like we
yeah,
worked out the values in A and then we tried the same values in B, and like 3 plus 3 plus 3 or 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1. It's like
yeah,
9.
yeah, exactly like that.
Rojas, there's just a question about whether the values would always be the same, but I guess they'd have to be, wouldn't they? If because you're going to apply it
Not
to then
always,
your
okay? So
shape.
sometimes, like the way you want to approach these, and I'm really sorry, I made these slides and I didn't fully explain them to everyone. That's the only reason I interrupted, as it's a really awkward kind of question. So I thought I'd probably say that so that no one is confused. What you want to do for these ones is you see this consistent appearance that you have a total of maybe 2 or 3 different side types of shapes. So like in set A, you only got 3 shapes: total pentagon or circle or triangle, total like 3 different types. And you have this giveaway feature, which is one box which has loads of the same kind of shape. So we started with this one in set A for this question, but in the previous question, we started with this one in set A. So like we started here. Once you identify that one, you're going to give it a value of a certain number of points, and you always want to start off with 1. See how that goes. So try and start off with 1, and then see how many points will that box sum up to. So in this case, we're now saying that this box will sum up to 7. We're now going to assume that all the other boxes in set A also sum up to 7. So if this box is 7, then we're going to assume, let's see if all the other boxes also sum up to 7, what would the other numbers be? And so we can try that out and we can see, okay, if this was 7, then triangle has to be 3. And then if this is 1, then these have to be 2. And if this is 2 and 2, does that add up to 7? And the answer is yes, it does. So if we work out these values and then all 6 boxes are adding up to 7, then we realize, okay, it's a shape sum pattern. When you get to that point, it's a good idea to try those same values in set B. So that's the key idea. If we've said 1, 2, and 3, you want to put 1, 2, and 3 in set B. So like you put 2, 2, 2, 2, and then 1. And you can see that if you try with all of them, they then add up to 9. And so in answer to your question, for both this question and the one before it, the values are exactly the same. Like in this case, we said circle was 1, and we said triangle was 1, and we said square was 2. And if you put the same values in set B, then you get the pattern you're looking for, 5 versus 7. The only time you would maybe try different values is if you tried it for set A and they all added up to a certain number, and then you tried it for set B, but they were adding up to different numbers. In that case, what you might want to do would be start with a different shape and then do like Jude was maybe saying, like try for triangle as 1 and see how that goes. But generally speaking, I would just try and use the same values if possible, and that would probably make the question a lot easier. And again, yeah, Megan's totally right. You're never going to get 100%, so don't worry. This is just for an idea if you're struggling with these ones, what you could do. So in terms of how we approach this, just repeating that again, you see this appearance, one box, lots of the same kind of shape. So like here we have 7 different pentagons in the same box and exactly the same shape. Now, if you look at any other of the patterns we've got, like let's look at all of these other patterns here, it doesn't look like that. Here you've got an arrow and some other shapes. Here you've got spirals and triangles. Here you've got lines. Here you've got like loads of different shapes, different colors. Here you've got different stuff. So it's not very often that you see this appearance, which is a total of 3 shapes and one box with like loads and loads of the exact same shape. So when you're seeing this particular appearance, that's when you're going for the sums. And this is not a very common appearance, right? You only get this sometimes. And when you're seeing this, you're immediately thinking about sum patterns. And that's why we're deciding when you see this really rare thing, then you're going to start giving it a value of 1 point. Does that make sense? For how do we identify it?
I think
Yeah,
it's probably
so
worth
particularly
mentioning
looking
that.
for that appearance. And really sorry to interrupt. I'm gonna let you keep going, Jude.
Yeah, no,
I
that's
thought like
okay.
I
I think it's
explained
probably
that really
worth
badly to you
mentioning.
when I made the slides. So I'll let you go ahead. That's my fault. Sorry.
No, don't worry. I think you've explained it very well. It's probably worth mentioning that this is definitely along the higher end of abstract reasoning questions. I don't think all of them are this difficult. They certainly weren't in my exam. And a lot of the time it's about luck and the questions you get on the day. Do you want to move on? So this one, I think from what Ojas was saying earlier, you can use an acronym if you want. I didn't, and I managed to get 830 in mine. But I think from this perspective, you've got to, even if you can't figure out what the exact pattern is, just try and zoom out and see set B as a whole instead of fixating on each of the tiles themselves, and set A as a whole. So if you want to message me directly in the chat and let me know what you think the patterns might be, and it doesn't matter if not, you can usually make quite a good educated guess on these questions. Just wait for other people. Someone's got a question saying, does everyone get the same UCAT exam? Which Frank's answered, it is random, yeah. So it is the luck of the draw on the day, unfortunately. Some of you will get easy questions, some of you will get a lot of hard questions. Yeah, so a lot of you have got exactly the right idea. It's that they sort of converge or move towards 1 point, as you can see on the screen. And then in set B, they're just going in opposite directions, like completely different directions. So I think that question would be quite easy to answer. But does anyone not understand that from the way I've explained it? You're all good. Should we move on to the next question? Okay, so this is spirals. Quite a unique style question. And obviously there's various different ways that are explained on the right-hand side of the screen in which patterns can occur. But just, again, try and zoom out, try and view set A as a whole and set B as a whole and see if you can decipher what pattern there may be. And just message me privately if you can find that. This is quite a hard one as well. Yeah, so a lot of you have got the right idea and are correct. In set A, whenever there's a black triangle, it goes clockwise, the spiral. You can see it there, you can see it there, you can see it there. And whenever there's a white triangle, it goes anti-clockwise, like that. And in set B, it is completely opposite. You've got, whenever there's a white triangle, there is a clockwise direction. And then whenever there's a black triangle, it's an anti-clockwise direction. Does that make sense for everyone? Any questions about that one? Good. And then we've got one final curveball question. So just move on. This is, again, quite a hard one. And just message me what you think the pattern might be. Someone said, what does it mean by loops? It's just the direction of the curvature of the line. I don't really know how else to explain it.
And also like the number of actual like full rotations that the spiral complete. So like sometimes they might only have 2 turns and sometimes it might be 3 turns.
Yeah, exactly as Frank says. And sometimes the spiral might overlap or with a different.
Imagine you had that versus that. And how many loops do you have on each one? Is that idea. Like this, you have 1, 2, 3, and then outside. Whereas here you just have 1, 2, and then outside. That's what it means.
So a lot of you have gone for even an odd number of sides, which I think is actually quite a good guess. And you'd probably, although it's not the exact pattern, you'd probably actually get a lot of the questions right if you were to answer it according to that. The actual pattern, it's quite a wishy-washy one. But in set A, whenever there's a black arrow, the shapes beside it are described as convex, i.e. they are outwardly protruding in a way, or they don't have an indentation like this. And whenever there's a white arrow, these are concave shapes, and the opposite applies for set B. I know it's really wishy-washy, and I probably wouldn't get this if I was doing the exam. I think it's really, really harsh, but does everyone understand that concept? I think if you were, I know what you mean with odd and even number of sides, and I think that might translate to some degree, but we'd have to see. Does everyone understand that? In terms of the size of the angles, okay, well, I suppose if it's inwardly protruding, this angle is going to be 90 degrees or less. If it's outwardly, it's going to be the opposite way. So it's going to be 270 or more. Ojas, do you have anything else to add to that? Someone's asked how could you explain
Yeah,
convex
sure.
and convex
So you
with
could
respect
think
to
about this in terms
angles?
of convex and concave. Definitely one option. The only problem is those are probably not the words that are going to come to your mind halfway through the UCAT exam. So you really don't need to. The only way I would look at this is like, can you see visually a difference? So the ones with a black arrow, you can see they're kind of your very traditional standard shapes. As in, if you were to cut them out of a piece of card, imagine you've got a bit of paper and you're trying to cut them out, you're never going to cut in towards the center. So if you're trying to cut those pieces of card, you're always cutting away from the center. You're never dipping back in. It's not like you made a bite into the shape. And if you look at some of these other ones where you have the white arrow, you can imagine if you were trying to cut them out from a bit of card, you'd have to make a bite into the shape. So you can see they all curve inwards, whereas the ones with black arrow all curve outwards. Now, it doesn't really matter whether or not you can define that pattern as long as you can see the difference. Like if I was to draw this one that I've got over here, that's like a little cloud, in set A, does that look more like the white arrow ones or more like the black arrow ones? What do you think? That cloud thing. Yeah, exactly. So in terms of finding out the pattern in words, I think that would be a nightmare. It would be to skip. But remember, you don't necessarily have to have a formal pattern. You just need to look at the shapes and see if they match up. So imagine we saw this cloud thing and we had a white arrow next to it. Well, then you'd have a look, set A, that's very similar. White arrows with these super weird shapes. But if you compare it to black arrow in set B, you got black arrow with the weird shapes. So you'd imagine that this is probably going to be set A. That's the kind of thing you would look for. Now, in terms of a formal definition, convex versus concave, I've actually forgotten, but I think it's something about internal angles being more than a certain number of degrees. So, like the interior angles, some of them are more than 180 degrees, I believe. And is Frank going to add something on that?
Yeah, just the way I remember it is that concave almost looks a bit like a cave. So
Yeah,
like
so I mean,
yeah,
that's the
so
easier
like
way. Have they got bites taken out of them? Have they got caves in?
yeah, exactly. So
Like, have they got bites in? I don't know what the actual angle is, and it doesn't really matter. I think it would be internal angles of more than 180,
yeah.
but something like that.
I think the
Yeah,
key
so
of these
concave is the one with a
questions.
bite in it, which is curving inwards, and convex is the one going outwards. So the concave ones are the ones which have caves in them. Concave.
Hmm. I think the key
Should
of these
we?
questions, guys, is to just do as much practice as possible, especially for these
Mhm.
abstract reasoning ones, because the more you do, the more patterns you will be able to recognize, and the faster you'll be able to do it. It is literally just pattern recognition, not overthinking it, not getting your head bogged down in acronyms, just trying to zoom out and view set A as one, set B as one, and using some of the techniques that we described today. Although I can understand that they are slightly hard to follow. Any questions?
So how I would approach this, by the way, in terms of when you see this kind of thing. So you're going to see in both this pattern and the one next to it, you've got one shape and it's present in two different colors. So like here you have a triangle and it's present in white versus black and it's in every single box. And here we've got arrows in white versus black and they're in every single box. When you see that kind of thing, something that is in every single box and in two colors, when you see that two colors thing, you're going to be looking for conditional patterns. So this was a really, really tricky one, but the idea is the same. Like in this case, you'd look for white versus black. So what you would do is you take a look at these white ones and you compare them to some of these black ones. And what you'd say is anything different between them? So whenever you see the white and the black and it's in every single box, you're thinking about maybe if this, then this, if that, then that. So you want to compare these red boxes to this orange box, what's different? And in this case, it was clockwise versus anti-clockwise spiral. Now, in this case, you do exactly the same. You'd compare white box versus black box, and you look at what's the difference. So like for this one, you'd see these ones are all white, and how are they different to maybe these ones that are black? And even if you couldn't come up with a formal pattern in words, you could say, oh, these shapes look pretty weird. And these are kind of the normal shapes that I learned about in primary school. So something like that in the back of my mind. You don't need to say what the pattern is, but can you see some kind of difference? Now, if you're really struggling, you might want to combine set A and B together. So you might say in set A, what the white shape is going to be exactly the same probably as set B, what the black shape is. Because we say that the patterns are usually opposites. So if you were really struggling, you might want to look at the white shapes in A and the black shapes in B, how they're similar, and then compare them to these black shapes in A and the white shapes in B. So how are these red ones similar? How are these orange ones similar? Might be the kind of things you look for when you have black and white.
One thing I was just going to say quickly is that these questions, I think probably more than most of the other ones, you know, for verbal reasoning, if you spend enough time reading the thing, you'll pretty much always get the answer. Whereas these ones, there's a lot more thinking about it. So I think my advice would probably be to, when you first start doing them, to take time and, you know, don't do them under the time pressure and actually work the patterns out. And then when you come to do it, you can spend a bit more time. Whereas with verbal reasoning, I would always, you know, if you read that passage for long enough, you'll pretty much always get the answer, and the time pressure is what makes it hard. Whereas here, it's about recognizing the patterns, and unless you know, you'll just get really stressed, and you probably won't get that far. So I would try and take time initially and just work through them slowly and then build up in the time pressure as well.
Like when I started, I got pretty high in the end. So I ended up with 3,470. When I started, maths ones I could do, reading ones I could do. These I just could not see them. Like I was starting off and I was getting 300s, 400s. I just couldn't see any of the patterns. And the one thing here is just practice. The more patterns you see, the more you practice with, the more you'll start to get the hang of them. And particularly untimed, like Frank said, really important to start off with. Now, if you're one of the lucky people who are good at abstract to start off with, like for me, verbal I was good with to start off with. So if you're good at abstract to start off with, then maybe you don't need to do so many and you can go straight on to timed. But if you're struggling to spot any of them, like I was, lots and lots of practice, lots and lots of questions, including untimed ones, will be very, very helpful. Like for this section particularly, I could not see any of them to start off with. And so the more you do untimed, the more you'll start to get a hang of it.